LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 19th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic, as you can see from the video title, is Republicans Kidnap Immigrants Seeking Asylum. And before I use my background as a criminal defense attorney to answer that question, for my political comedy, I want to start with an absurd answer to that question from a partisan hack masquerading as a legal analyst on Fox News, Jonathan Turley, who's been a political hack on Fox News. You may remember going back to the Trump impeachments, and anyway, he gives the absolute wrong answer to the question that I pose in the title of my video, Republicans Kidnap Immigrants Seeking Asylum, which I will talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I want to start with California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is calling on the DOJ potentially to step in here. He says that people were giving false representations about where they were being going, transported, that kind of thing. What would be waiting for them? He says, I urge U.S. DOJ to investigate whether the alleged fraudulent inducement would support charges of kidnapping under relevant state laws, which could serve as a predicate offense for charges under RICO. Jonathan, you've written about this.
Yeah, it's absurd. They suggest that this can be kidnapping. There might have been confusion. There might have been misrepresentation for some. But these are consensual trips, and they have records of the consent. You have Hillary Clinton saying that this is literally human trafficking, which is legally nonsense. I mean, human trafficking is designed to prevent sexual and labor exploitation. These are people who have been released into the country by the Biden administration and have accepted trips to cities like Chicago, New York, in this case, Martha's Vineyard. They have a right to go on those trips, and the states have a right to facilitate them.
So here is what President Biden has had.
So Jonathan Turley's right there about the human trafficking laws, and I didn't see the clip that he's criticizing from Hillary Clinton claiming it's human trafficking, but to claim that people consented based on misrepresentations and that means it's not kidnapping, I mean, that's a joke, because if you consent based on a misrepresentation, that is actually part of the kidnapping statute. They were talking about kidnapping. They showed the clip or the quote from California Governor Gavin Newsom asking about state laws, but there's actually a federal kidnapping statute. I put a link down in the video description to the sources of all my clips, and also to this kidnapping statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 1201. And you can see Section A says, whoever unlawfully seizes, confines, inveigles, decoys. Inveigles, decoys. Those are the key words. Or kidnaps, abducts, or carries away and holds for ransom or reward or otherwise. The words or otherwise are also really important, except in the case of a minor by the parent thereof, when you can see sub 1 means they cross state lines, which of course these people did. And then you go all the way down to the end of Section A, and it says, shall be punished by imprisonment for any term of years or for life. So it's up to life imprisonment for violating this code, and all you have to do is unlawfully inveigle or decoy someone for ransom or reward or otherwise. So that's the statute there. And what is, Jonathan Turley said that it's okay if they consented based on a misrepresentation. Well, that's tricking people. That's what inveigle means, or decoy. And I even have a link down in the video description to this federal case from the 8th Circuit, United States versus Hoog, from 1974, where they talk about what the words inveigle or decoy mean. This is a case of this guy, or actually co-defendants. There are 3 counts where they got these women. In count 1, they told this woman they were going to drive her home, but instead they drove her off to Kansas and raped her. And then the count 2 and 3, they told these women they were going to drive them to a employment interview where they could get a job, and instead they drove them off across state lines into Kansas and raped them. And the defendants there claimed, oh, well, they consented to get in the car because they thought they were going to the job interview or whatever. And here's what the Eighth Circuit said in the link I put down in the video description. Hoog asserts that the court erred in not granting a new trial or judgment of acquittal to prove because of the government's failure to prove that any of the victims were transported across state lines against their will. Uncontradicted testimony of each victim discloses that either Mills or Hoog induced each of them to accept a ride by false representations. Once they had accepted a ride, Hoog or Mills lured or enticed each of them again by false promises to stay in the vehicle during its roundabout course into Kansas. The complaining witnesses were manifestly inveigled or decoyed into accepting rides within the plain meaning of the kidnapping statute. So that totally contradicts what the legal analysis, the bogus legal analysis you just heard from Jonathan Turley. And some people think that to kidnap someone you need to get some sort of ransom or reward. But remember, I showed you in the statute here that you need to trick someone into coming with you for ransom or reward or otherwise. And that's the other federal case. This is from the D.C. Circuit, United States versus Wolford. I put a link down in the video description. You can see what it says about what does or otherwise mean. Under the Federal Kidnapping Act, it is thus settled that involuntariness of seizure and detention is the very essence of the crime, and under Gooch and Healy that the motive behind the kidnapping is not important so long as the act was done with the expectation of benefit to the transgressor. In fact, the Third Circuit has gone so far as to say we think that Congress, by the phrase or otherwise, intended to include any object of a kidnapping which the perpetrator might consider of sufficient benefit to himself to induce him to undertake it. So that means Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott, if they get a political benefit, that's enough of a benefit to meet the or otherwise clause in the federal kidnapping statute. So Jonathan Turley is a partisan hack, and just to cleanse our palate from that terrible, terrible legal analysis, I want to show you some really good legal analysis on Saturday on MSNBC's The Cross Connection. Here's Tiffany Cross asking a constitutional scholar, Elie Mystal, who also wrote this book I have over my left shoulder, Allow Me to Retort a Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution, which I think this commentary definitely recommends a reading of. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Elie Mystal give good legal analysis to get us past that partisan hackery of Jonathan Turley, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
A wonderful piece in The Nation. You're always so insightful and thoughtful in your writing. As much as you all enjoy Elie on television, his writing is just quite taking and insightful. You wrote about these governors shipping migrants to different countries. We saw just this morning that a group of migrants were dropped off in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's residence. We have seen migrants get dropped off in Martha's Vineyard, or on Martha's Vineyard, I should say. We're seeing Republican Florida man Ron DeSantis do this. We're seeing in Texas Republican Greg Abbott do this. This sounds like it could be breaking the law. I mean, is this human trafficking? Is this kidnapping? Is this legal?
First of all, I want to say there is nothing wrong with us as a nation trying to come up with the best place to handle influxes of immigrants and new Americans. That is good. We should have a national immigration plan. You know who stops us from having a national immigration plan? Republicans. Republicans are the ones who force us to do this in a state-by-state way. And now particular Republicans, particularly fascist Republicans, are trying to ship migrants around the country to make them suffer and try to expose for a MAGA lark and troll the libs. What I believe is happening here is kidnapping. It's not quite true to Hoyle human trafficking, just because the way our laws are written are kind of specific in terms of trafficking for the purposes of sex or labor. Trafficking for the purposes of having a laugh at liberals is not a human trafficking violation, as I read the law. However, kidnapping is a thing. Kidnapping by trick is a thing. Telling people that you were going to take them one place and sending them someplace else is a form of kidnapping. And I can prove that to you if I do the Matthew McConaughey thing. Now imagine they were white. Imagine Ron DeSantis goes up to a group of white teenagers, offers them some candy, and says, hey, I'm going to take you to Disney World if you get in my van. And then Ron DeSantis drives them to Busch Garden. That's kidnapping. You're not allowed to do that. And so the people who did that, the organizers who did that, and perhaps even the governor, they should be charged with kidnapping. The other horrible part of this story is that we're hearing now from the immigration attorneys who descended upon Martha's Vineyard. And oh, by the way, MAGA fascists, like doing a political stunt within shouting distance of some of the hardest hitting lawyers in the country, maybe not your best tactical choice. But anyway, some of the immigration lawyers on Martha's Vineyard have said that these people were processed by DHS and told DHS that they didn't have addresses. And DHS made up fake addresses for them so that they would be too far away from those addresses to go to future hearings. That's an allegation. I don't know if that's true. That's what the immigration attorneys are saying. If that's true, the DHS agents involved need to be investigated, fired, and prosecuted for abuse of power. So this is potentially a much bigger scandal, and we need investigation and accountability for it.
And I just want to say, I do not believe NBC.
So yeah, that was much better legal analysis from Elie Mystal, MSNBC commentator, and I'm a big fan of Elie Mystal. All of his appearances are, I mean, the one thing, he's talked about whether they should be, I think that what they've done has met the elements of the criminal statute, as I explained before I showed the clip, as to whether they're going to be prosecuted or should be prosecuted. I mean, we have, the Trump people talk about a two-tier legal system where Democrats don't get prosecuted but Republicans do, but it's actually poor people are the ones who get prosecuted, and rich people like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, they don't get prosecuted, and it's a lot harder to prosecute them because they have resources that almost equal the resources of the prosecutors and the state and whatever. I don't want to go into all the inequities of the criminal justice system, but actually Chris Hayes's book right here, A Colony in a Nation, is about the two-tiered criminal justice system. And of course, you can always read The New Jim Crow, which if you want to learn more about that. But anyway, Elie Mystal otherwise, I believe, was accurate in his portrayal of how the kidnapping statute should be applied here. And anyway, I want to get to now the facts and some of the newsmakers. I have all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets giving their news summaries. The best one, the longest one this week was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They focused on this main topic, a few other things, but mainly the immigration crisis and the controversy over these Republican governors tricking immigrants asking for asylum to get on these planes and buses and go off to places they didn't really want to go. But anyway, I will start talking about that more after I'm going to show you all 5 of the news summaries from longest to shortest, and I'm going to start with the longest and best one from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their anchor Jon Karl, and then Mireya Villarreal, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, their reporter, talking about this issue, which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. With just 51 days until the midterm elections, 2 powerful Republican governors, both of them with political ambitions beyond their own states, are making an extraordinary gambit to put America's broken border as a front and center issue this fall. Dropping busloads of migrants without notice on a busy Washington street right in front of the vice president's house, as Texas Governor Greg Abbott did this week, is a stunt pure and simple. So is chartering planes to transport migrants to Martha's Vineyard, as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did. But beyond the political gamesmanship and cynical use of human beings as pawns is something all too real. America is in the midst of an immigration crisis. The number of undocumented migrants crossing the southern border, most of them fleeing violence and economic devastation and trying to find a better life for their families, is on track to hit 2 million this year, an all-time record. The influx is overwhelming the already strained resources of communities on the border. And the Biden administration seems to have no real plan to address the crisis. Dropping buses of people in front of the vice president's home won't solve the problem, and neither will chartering planes to an island off the coast of Massachusetts. But those Republican governors are promising more of that to come.
I got $12 million for us to use, and so we are going to use it, and you're going to see more and more, but I'm going to make sure that we exhaust all those funds.
The mayors of El Paso and New York are both standing by. We begin with ABC News national correspondent Mireya Villarreal, who is in Texas on the border with Mexico and tracking the very latest. Good morning, Mireya.
Hey, good morning, John. Look, as you know, border crossings is nothing new, and politicians using immigration to rile up a certain amount of people, that is nothing new either. But I have lived on the border, grew up on the border, and have been covering immigration for well over a decade. Right now, this busing situation, that is fairly new. But for people living here in El Paso, the city leaders here, this isn't about politics. This is absolutely about people.
Martha's Vineyard, a remote island off the Massachusetts coast, is hardly the expected battleground for America's immigration crisis. But this week, it was after Florida's Republican governor flew about 50 migrants to the island. Governor Ron DeSantis taking ownership, saying this draws attention to what he calls an ineffective immigration system.
It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this.
El Paso now averaging 1,300 migrants a day, an influx so daunting, the city had to open an emergency processing facility.
Is this city at a breaking point?
We're at a critical point. We need something to happen.
Most of these families are from Venezuela, fleeing economic hardship and an oppressive government. El Paso now hiring its own charter buses to help move migrants north, most of them heading to New York. Since July, the city has spent more than $1 million on bus transportation.
The act of busing is a necessity for you guys.
We do not have the shelter capacity. As you've seen, you know, on top of the people we're bringing in, you know, there's over 1,000 releases to our community a day.
Separately, Texas Governor Greg Abbott busing some 11,000 migrants north so far. New York's mayor says the city needs more resources.
We need help. We have not been ashamed to say that. We need help.
In the last month, migrants bused to Chicago and Washington, D.C. And just one day after DeSantis flew migrants to Martha's Vineyard, another group from Texas, sent by Governor Abbott, dropped off right in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's home. Many say they didn't expect to end up here. Immigration attorneys working with the groups now say the migrants were lied to.
They were told there was a surprise present for them and that there would be jobs and housing awaiting for them when they arrived. This was obviously a sadistic lie.
Governor DeSantis defending the tactic.
They're given a good ride, they're given everything, and that's just, you know, it's a humane thing to do.
The president calling this a political stunt.
It's un-American, it's reckless, and we have a process in place to manage migrants at the border.
Volunteers helping migrants now sleeping on the streets say that help can't come fast enough.
Any concern about how long this city can sustain helping the mass of people that are coming through here?
Well, that's always a concern, but it's a matter of just keeping it together and keep helping, not just give up on them. Just, you know, we'll find a way. We always do.
And John, just to be very clear, these are not illegal aliens. It is not okay to say that. These are migrants, asylum seekers that have been processed by our own very Border Patrol right here in El Paso. I have to also say, for moving forward, El Paso says right now they don't need a surge of people coming from the feds. What they do need is transportation. They're even talking about maybe setting up a temporary shelter funded by the federal government. That is what they need right now on the border.
Mireya Villarreal, thank you. We're joined now by the mayor of El Paso, Oscar Leeser.
And kudos to Mireya Villarreal there for pointing out that these people shouldn't be called illegals. You saw Ron DeSantis calls them illegals, but these are asylum seekers. That's why I put in my video title, Republicans Kidnapping Immigrants Seeking Asylum. It's legal to ask for asylum. A lot of these people are coming from Venezuela, like a communist dictatorship, which later I'm going to show you Jake Tapper cross-examining Republican Senator Mike Rounds about why Republicans are being so cruel to people who are seeking asylum from communism. I thought Republicans were supposed to be compassionate about people who are seeking asylum from communism, because don't they hate communism? But whatever. You saw that was the longest best news summary from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They mentioned that they were asylum seekers. They mentioned that you saw like the lawyers at Martha's Vineyard talking about how the people who had been sent there by airplane had been lied to about like a special surprise and jobs, and I've even seen more reporting on that about this brochure they gave them about getting all these benefits in Massachusetts that were only for people who were referred by the UN Committee on Human Rights or something. Anyway, there are all sorts of misrepresentations that fit the whole kidnapping statute that I was talking about earlier. But I want to get to the next news summary. This is CBS News' Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan does a pretty good job of talking about the same facts, and I will talk about that news summary after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It is a somber Sunday as we come on the air today. In London, there is unprecedented security for the hundreds of world leaders, including President Biden, who are gathering for tomorrow's state funeral of Queen Elizabeth. It will be the largest assembly of heads of state and government in years. Our Scott Pelley spoke with President Biden before he left for the UK and discussed how he's navigating the new world order for tonight's season premiere of 60 Minutes.
President Xi and Vladimir Putin have met on the same day that you and I are sitting here in the White House. And I wonder if this is a new, more complicated Cold War. How do you manage it?
I don't think it is a new, more complicated Cold War. Look, when President Xi invited Putin to Beijing during the Olympics, where they had their meeting and the new relationship, not long after that, I called President Xi. Not to threaten at all, just to say to him, we've met many times. And I said that if you think that Americans and others will continue to invest in China based on your violating the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia, I think you're making a gigantic mistake, but that's for your decision to make. Thus far, there's no indication that they've put forward weapons or other things that Russia has wanted. So, well, maybe I shouldn't say anymore.
Oh, I wish you would.
No.
Here at home, a political firestorm erupted between Republicans and Democrats over immigration, an issue made more complicated by challenging relationships between the U.S. and some of our neighbors to the south. Republican governors have been relocating some who've crossed the border into their red states for months now. But last week, the images of migrants flown or bust from Texas to Martha's Vineyard, Vice President Harris's residence in Washington and New York City, has sparked a fury of political backlash.
I think it is the height of irresponsibility, much less just, frankly, a dereliction of duty when you are an elected leader to play those kinds of games with human life.
They were so proud to be sanctuary jurisdictions, saying how bad it was to have a secure border. The minute even a small fraction of what those border towns deal with every day is brought to their front door, they all of a sudden go berserk.
Now New Yorkers and people in Washington, D.C. are having to deal with it, and now Texas is sharing our pain with the rest of the country.
The U.S. is set to record more than 2 million migrant arrests at the border with Mexico this year, a record high. We turn now to Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar. He represents a border district.
And I don't have a clip of Henry Cuellar, but down at the link in the video description next to Face the Nation, you can see the entire Face the Nation program cut into clips on their YouTube channel if you click on that link, and including the interview with Henry Cuellar, which is interesting. But I actually have a clip from former Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson that I think clarifies some of the questions about moving people around, and how it's important to move people from border areas to other places so the border areas aren't so impacted. But that's different than what the Ron DeSantis in Florida and Greg Abbott in Texas have been doing, where they trick people into going places they don't want to go. And anyway, I'll get to that more when I get to those newsmaker clips. But the next news summary, it's a quote unquote news summary because of course it's from Fox News Sunday. Shannon Bream is a huge partisan hack who's taken over the program, which is in keeping with the tradition of Fox News, because Fox News Sunday was originally hosted by Tony Snow, also a partisan hack. And if you want to know why Fox News is not really a journalistic outlet but is a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, well, just read this book over here by Gabriel Sherman, The Loudest Voice in the Room. It tells you that Roger Ailes actually created Fox News to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. Or go to my channel on YouTube, youtube.com/LiberalViewer, and look at all the over 200 examples of Fox News bias I created over the years just to prove the point. But anyway, this Fox News Sunday news summary, it's kind of the same stuff, but it's pointing out how the important issues are inflation and immigration, and abortion, and then they have Lindsey Graham on to talk about abortion, and I didn't take that clip because I chose the Jonathan Turley clip instead. But you can see this whole news summary from Shannon Bream and then Lucas Tomlinson is skewed against the Biden administration and the bad economic news and trying to make Biden look as bad as possible. It doesn't really fit with any of the other 4 news summaries, because the other 4 news summaries are from journalistic organizations, not Fox News. And here's the non-journalistic Fox News summary that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. We are now just about 50 days out from midterms, and headlines on huge issues like immigration, inflation, and abortion are changing the dynamics. Just this week, the president again made his case that inflation, he says, will soon ease. And spats between governors over migrant arrivals forced vulnerable candidates to respond. In the middle of all of this, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham caused outcry in his own party by proposing a bombshell bill banning abortion after 15 weeks. Senator Graham defended himself on Fox News Digital this morning in an op-ed, writing, quote, "Voters in key battleground states prefer a candidate who supports protections at 15 weeks to a candidate who believes in abortion on demand at any stage of pregnancy." In a moment, we will speak live exclusively with Senator Graham and ask him whether his colleagues agree with him. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House, where the administration faces a tough balancing act on the economy. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, President Biden's poll numbers have increased 3% over the past 2 months, but overall his job approval rating remains underwater.
A new Fox News poll says 43% of voters now approve of the president's job performance. 56% disapprove. Only 3% say inflation is under control. 55% say not at all.
I've seen fire and
With James Taylor crooning, President Biden celebrated the passage of one of his signature pieces of legislation.
I signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law, a single most important legislation passed in the Congress to combat inflation.
While Biden was spiking the football on the South Lawn, stocks fell, the biggest drop in more than 2 years, as recession fears continue. On Saturday, another chartered busload of migrants arriving at the vice president's house for the second time in 2 days. More buses also arriving in New York from Texas. Governor Greg Abbott says he plans to send even more.
If they will not go to the border, we're taking the border to them.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also sending migrants up north, 50 arriving by plane on the wealthy island of Martha's Vineyard, over the objections of some residents who say they can't handle that many and called in the National Guard. The migrants were quickly put on a ferry bound for Cape Cod. The vice president still claiming the southern border is secure. Not everyone in her party agrees.
It's wrong. She's dead wrong on that.
Experts say inflation, the border, and abortion are on the ballot this fall, after Senator Lindsey Graham introduced new legislation banning abortion after 15 weeks. The Senate's top Democrat says this is not a path to victory.
They're not going to be able to run and duck and bob and weave and tie themselves in pretzel knots.
President Biden is in London today, where he will attend Queen Elizabeth's funeral Monday morning. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson for us at the White House this morning. Thank you, Lucas. And joining us now here in Washington, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
And I don't have any clips of Senator Lindsey Graham trying to defend his 15-week abortion ban at the federal level, and he spews all this misinformation, all this medical misinformation about what fetuses at certain ages can feel pain, and there's all sorts of ridiculous stuff that he says, and Shannon Bream, of course, being the partisan hack she is, does not cross-examine him on any of it, but that wasn't the topic I took this week. I talked about abortion and the abortion ruling multiple times in the last several weeks, and in a way I'm falling into the Republican trap here, where the reason Ron DeSantis of Florida and Greg Abbott in Texas decided to pull these stunts this week that could be classified under federal law as kidnapping is because they want us to be talking about immigration this week, not about abortion, even though Lindsey Graham proposed this national 15-week abortion ban. And basically we're with the midterms approaching, if we're talking about immigration instead of abortion, that means Republicans are winning. So I guess my my topic this week kind of fell into that trap, but I don't really believe that my weekly live stream is going to determine the outcome of the midterm elections. What I choose is my topic, and I actually enjoy addressing this ridiculous topic and especially this topic about doing the legal analysis as to whether it qualifies as kidnapping, which it obviously does if you can read the federal statute and the pertinent case law that I talked about at the beginning of the program. But anyway, I have two more news summaries, the two shortest ones I want to get through before I get to the newsmaker interview clips. The next one is NBC News Meet the Press, where this is one of the biases. It's not a partisan political bias like Fox News has, but I talk about how the corporate media has a lot of other biases, towards sensationalism, towards corporatism, towards both sidism, and also towards their exclusive guests and polls. This NBC News Meet the Press decided to center their recent poll as the big news. Is a poll really that big news? I don't really think so. But anyway, that's what's centered by Chuck Todd and Meet the Press in their news summary that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. President Biden is finally getting his polling bump. A spate of news, from anger over the overturning of Roe v. Wade to falling gas prices, has helped push the president's poll numbers to their highest point in almost a year. And it's thanks mostly to Democrats coming home. In fact, among all registered voters, Mr. Biden's job approval in our new NBC News poll is sitting at 45%, 52% disapproving. The big jump really was from Democrats, particularly younger ones, happy about the passage of the agenda, perhaps student loans as well. But those are hardly robust numbers, and they're a jump from last month's 42-55 split. And the race for control of Congress is dead even, 46% for Democrats, 46% for Republicans. The remarkable thing about Mr. Biden's numbers, though, is how he even manages to get to 45%. On issue after issue, his approval ratings are actually consistently below 45. On foreign policy, it's just 42%. The economy even lower, 40. Border, lower than that, 36. And on cost of living, even lower at a paltry 30%. So, what's happening? One is, of course, the Dobbs decision. It's clearly energizing voters, and not just Democrats. Only 37% approve of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe. 61% disapprove of that decision. But just as important to President Biden is getting a lift from simply Donald Trump's presence. The high-profile investigations, all of it is preventing Republicans from turning the midterms into a referendum on Mr. Biden. And he loves to say, judge him by the alternative, not the almighty. And he may be benefiting from that right now. Voter feelings towards Mr. Trump are just 34% positive, 54% negative. 20 points underwater. It's his lowest point in a year and a half. Compare that to President Biden's current personal ratings. 42% positive, 47% negative. Not great, but that's only 5 points underwater. So where are we? Bottom line is this. Less than 2 months from the midterms, each political party is running the campaign they want to run. Republicans on crime, economy, and immigration, and they're winning that battle with the voters. Democrats are running on Mr. Trump and abortion rights, and they're winning that battle with the voters. So what's going to happen? Joining me now is the #2 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin of Illinois.
And I will have a clip of Dick Durbin talking about this publicity stunt by the Republican governors, which also might be a crime. And I thought that, I told you that I thought that was biased in terms of focusing on the poll results, but you saw Chuck Todd did get to some of the important issues there. And actually, I think this next news summary, the shortest news summary from CNN's State of the Union, Jake Tapper, I don't know, maybe he should get the award for fitting the most number of facts into the shortest period of time, because I think he covers all those important issues that you've seen in the previous 4 news summaries, but this one is less than 2 minutes long, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is pointing fingers over our broken immigration system. President Biden and the First Lady are right now in London, where they will join leaders from around the world for tomorrow's funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. We're going to bring you today's events in a little bit, but we begin on the migrant crisis here in the U.S., where blue state leaders are scrambling to care for the thousands of asylum seekers shipped up north without warning by Republican governors in Texas and Florida. The roughly 50 migrants flown from Texas to Martha's Vineyard this week are currently being cared for, and they have been moved by Republican Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker to a military base on Cape Cod, where there are better facilities. But Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis says this is just the beginning. He says he's going to use, quote, every penny of the $12 million allocated by his state to relocate more migrants out of Florida, as he and Texas Governor Greg Abbott, both of whom are said to harbor presidential ambitions, say it is time for blue states to share their burden. On Saturday, according to the Washington Post, that burden included a month-old baby who was sent from Texas and dropped with other migrants outside the vice president's residence in Washington, D.C. The second round of buses sent by Texas's governor, and a move the vice president criticized.
They're playing games. These are political stunts with real human beings who are fleeing harm.
While the mayors of Washington, D.C. and New York say they are not equipped to handle this influx. Joining me now is the mayor of New York City, Democrat Eric Adams. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us.
I will actually have a clip of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, not from CNN's State of the Union, but from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But you saw there Jake Tapper talking about most of the facts you saw in the previous news summaries condensed into the shortest news summary about the inhumane tactics applied to people who were seeking asylum. And this next clip is actually Jake Tapper cross-examining a Republican, Senator Mike Rounds. I think, is he the senator from North Dakota? One of the Dakotas. Like, at one point during this interview, he admits that there are more immigrants coming over the border. Like 4 times as many immigrants have come over the border than are citizens of my state, which makes me wonder, why does his state have 2 senators? Like, why do we give 4 senators to the 2 Dakotas? But anyway, that's a whole different question, and I will talk about he definitely avoids the question, and I don't think Jake Tapper does. I usually think Jake Tapper is one of the best cross-examiners, but this cross-examination from Jake Tapper may be not up to par, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
With immigration, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis flew planes of migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard this week without any warning to local officials. I get that the immigration system is a mess and has needed reform for decades, but these are people fleeing Marxism in Venezuela. Many were, they say, falsely told there would be jobs and housing waiting for them when they arrived in Massachusetts. Do you support what Abbott and DeSantis are doing?
They're doing their best to try to send a message to the rest of the nation about the plight of those individuals that are coming from south of the border. You're talking about 3.4 million people just since the start of this Biden administration that have crossed the border. And they're coming into southern states. What is a governor supposed to do? They're trying to send a message to the rest of the country that this is not acceptable and that their states can't handle that type of an inflow. That's the equivalent of 4 times the population of my state of South Dakota. But Jake, it's more than that. It's also everything else that's coming across the border at the same time. We're 1,200 miles away from the border here in South Dakota, and yet the drug trafficking still affects our state as well. Our Native American population, reservations, have got huge inflows of drug trafficking coming into our state, into some of the heaviest poverty areas of the entire country. So it's affecting all of our states, but the administration is not doing anything about it.
So, as I said, this immigration crisis has been going on literally for decades. There hasn't been a major immigration bill since Ronald Reagan was president. But as you did not note, and I did earlier in the show, one of the buses sent by Texas Governor Greg Abbott dropped off about 50 migrants in front of the vice president's residence, including a 1-month-old baby. There isn't any heads up being given to Mayor Adams, you just heard from him, or the individuals on Martha's Vineyard. I get they're trying to send a message, they're trying to get the attention, but there also, isn't there a degree of trolling going on here? And do you really have no issue with using human beings, a 1-month-old baby, little kids, to make a political point like this?
You have to put it in perspective of what's happening at the southern border right now. This is every single day, thousands of individuals coming across with babies. And they're coming into those states. Those governors are facing that not just at the terms of 50 of them, they're talking about hundreds of them, if not thousands per day. And so, do any of us like the situation that we're in? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I would suspect that the individuals in the southern states that are trying to find a way to get the attention of the administration would love to have other alternatives to them. It's been 606 days since Joe Biden took office, and this problem has done nothing except continue to develop. This is a national problem, and yet these governors along the southern borders are the ones that are faced with trying to address it.
Right.
And it's not just 50 of these individuals coming across, it's thousands, and it's on a daily basis.
Right. Of course, the immigration laws in this country do allow people to come to this country to seek asylum. It seems to me that the larger solution that needs to happen here, and I don't know that you would disagree, is a comprehensive immigration bill that would include border security, And then, perhaps in order for there to be a compromise, a pathway to citizenship for people who have been here for decades. In the more than 20 years I've been in this town, I've seen people like President George W. Bush and Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Marco Rubio trying to get immigration reform done, working with Democrats. Every time they were defeated by House Republicans who wouldn't go along with any sort of compromise. Would you support restarting bipartisan negotiations to try to finally fix this broken immigration system?
Those discussions are ongoing in the United States Senate. In fact, the last time that there was a hard push was in 2017. Myself and Senator Angus King co-sponsored the measure together on behalf of a bipartisan group. We got 54 votes in the Senate at that time, and that included addressing the folks that have been brought here through no fault of their own, the Dreamers. We addressed chain migration. We addressed a pathway to citizenship over an extended period of years. We thought we had a pretty good approach. Nothing has happened during this administration. Yes, would we like to step forward again and try an approach again? Absolutely. Do we have to address it? Yes. Do we have to have a border security? Before anything else can happen, we've got to be able to defend that border. We've got to be able to make a border that actually works. Otherwise, why should people pay any attention to the laws that we've got? And what good would it do to reform them if we're not going to enforce them?
Let's turn to abortion, because this week your Republican
So yeah, Jake Tapper turns to abortion there, but at least he did make the point that everyone talking about our failed immigration system should make, which is every time comprehensive immigration reform was proposed, it was defeated by House Republicans. It's the Republicans who cannot come to a bipartisan agreement on comprehensive immigration reform. That's why there hasn't been any reform to our immigration system since Ronald Reagan was president. So kudos to Jake Tapper for pointing that out. And then also in both his news summary and then in his questioning of Republican Senator Mike Rounds, he asked this question about why is it that Republicans are always putting the burden of the immigration controversy on children, like babies are being inveigled and decoyed into these plane trips to Martha's Vineyard, or no, I think it was to be sent by buses to the vice president's residence or whatever. Why are they always like using babies to make their political point? And on that issue, I also want to say, read this book, Separated, about how the Trump administration separated thousands of children from their parents, and some of them have not yet been reunited. It's one of the huge injustices that still lingers on from the Trump administration, and so kudos to Jake Tapper from pointing that out. But anyway, I have a few more newsmaker clips, all Democrats. The next one is Dick Durbin talking to Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press about whether the federal government should stop this like kidnapping of immigrants seeking asylum by Republican governors in Texas and Florida, and whether they're breaking the law. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
With the stunt, I guess is the best way to call it, that Governor DeSantis did when trying to fund the flight of migrants in Texas that he claimed might have been coming to Florida. He had no and sent them to Massachusetts. Here was his rationale for it, and then I want to ask you more on the other side.
We are not a sanctuary state, and it's better to be able to go to a sanctuary jurisdiction. And yes, we will help facilitate that transport for you.
All right, do you think these whether it's these bus tickets to the Naval Observatory, New York, D.C., or Martha's Vineyard, do you think the federal government should stop them and prevent them from happening?
Well, I can tell you this. I've been to the Salvation Army Rescue Center in Chicago, and I've met with the people who came off the buses. I sat down with one of the families, and they told me the story. It is pathetic that these governors are taking advantage of these helpless people, making promises to them to get on the bus and life is just going to be fine, and off they go to places far removed from where they're supposed to be appearing under the requirements of our law in a matter of weeks and months. So he's jeopardizing their stay in the United States when each governor makes this decision. And the second part I want to raise is this, Chuck. Why is it when the Republicans want to enforce their immigration theories, it's always the kids that end up being the victims? We saw it with kids in cages. We saw it with the forcible removal of children from their parents, some who've never been reunited with their families. And now, once again, it's the kids and families that are put on these buses and transported for political purposes across the United States.
Do you believe laws were broken here by Governor DeSantis?
I don't know if the laws were specifically broken, but they have broken every basic standard of decency when it comes to dealing with children and families. These people are, at the moment, legally in the United States. Some of them, one family I met, it's been 5 months coming up from Venezuela, literally walking to our border. They went through every possible outrage that you can imagine, from theft, stealing their cell phones, pushing them into a jungle for a period of time where this man didn't think he could survive, and they finally made it to the United States only to be exploited by the governor of Texas in their case. I just don't think that when you get down to the basic rules of politics, this passes the smell test.
All right.
So yeah, it does not pass the smell test, and I mean, I wish Dick Durbin had gone as far as Ellie Mystal and talk about how what the governors of Texas and Florida have done actually amounts to kidnapping under federal law, but he sort of alluded to that. Whatever. That's the closest, I guess, you can get from the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. But the next clip I want to show you is from Obama's Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And remember, Obama deported a lot of people back in the Obama administration. You know, I worked as an ACLU activist, and we were protesting against Obama's immigration policy, and at the time he was actually called the deporter-in-chief. So Jay Johnson is not soft on immigration. He was presiding over the Obama administration's policy that got Obama called the deporter-in-chief, but even he thinks that what Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott have been doing makes immigrants treated as cattle, treated as livestock. And there's a way to do it. I mean, people have to be moved from these border communities to places where, there isn't such a great impact from newly arrived asylum seekers. But anyway, that's the penultimate newsmaker clip I want to play for you before I talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So when it comes to moving migrants around the country right now, you're a lawyer. The federal government moves migrants from the border to other parts of this country quite often. What's the difference when a state governor does it, albeit, I know, without warning?
Well, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that, Margaret. The wrong way is on 20 minutes notice to send people by bus or airplane to the Edgartown airport or to Mass Ave in front of the vice president's residence without giving local resources, NGOs, shelters, local government an opportunity to plan for how they intend to feed and clothe and house migrants. What the governors of Florida and Texas are doing, frankly, is a political stunt. And treating people like livestock. The right way to move people to the interior, and I think it's something that we should do. 8,000 a day into McAllen, into Henry Cuellar's district in Laredo or El Paso, I've been saying for some time is not sustainable. And so we do need to move people to the interior, but through a well-coordinated effort in coordination with NGOs, Catholic charities, state and local government, and the federal government. There is a right way to do that. It requires coordination and cooperation.
Why isn't that happening? I guess is the question we keep coming back to. And as you're saying, it's becoming politicized. The Wall Street Journal had an op-ed saying it's hard to imagine a bigger spectacle of American political failure than the histrionics over migrants. They slam Republicans for staging a political stunt, but they also say Democrats are just trying to deflect away from their own border policy failures. Is that a fair assessment in your view?
Frankly, Margaret, the politics currently are such that politicians, elected officials, find it more advantageous to simply scream at the other side and complain about how evil or lax the other side is. It does take political courage to come together and put together legislation on comprehensive immigration reform. It passed the Senate in 2013. It failed in the House in 2014. But that's simply the only way we're going to deal with this problem, through guest worker programs, through stronger border security, through trying to address the problem at the source. It takes political courage, but right now the politics of this issue are all wrong, and I'm afraid nothing's getting done.
But we have a crisis, so it requires action. Do you see a clear, coordinated planning or strategy from the White House that controls Customs and Border Patrol and Homeland Security and the people on the front lines of this?
I know DHS is working very hard. They've ramped up the resources to deal with the influx at the southern border. It's much larger. The ability to move larger volumes of people is much larger than it was 7, 8 years ago. But there needs to be a more comprehensive federal, state, local, executive, and legislative branch effort at this. And we can do this if we're willing to cooperate, work together, exercise some political courage, have the governor of Texas willing to work with the governors of some northern states at moving people in a more coordinated, cooperative fashion into the interior of our country.
So, yeah, there you see the former head of the Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration saying that it's not a problem to move people from border areas to other places in the United States because you don't want the border areas to be so impacted. But the important thing is to coordinate, to let people know when you're moving people seeking asylum. These are legal immigrants, not illegal aliens, and the way to do it is to tell the truth to the people you're moving, to coordinate with the places they're going to end up, and come up with a plan where everybody knows what's happening. And Jay Johnson is giving you what should be happening in a world where people are working together to help people. But this final newsmaker clip from the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos will show you that no, that's not what's happening. He actually tried to reach out to the governors of Texas and Florida to say, let's coordinate. Let's figure out how we can help the people who are coming in, and you send them to New York and we'll be ready and have services. But no, they're not. It's not like by the end of this clip, you'll see Eric Adams says they took the call, and when they answered the call, their answer was, no, we don't want to coordinate with you. We are trying to create a political controversy. We don't want to help people. And that is, that's the what you're going to learn from this final newsmaker clip, after which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
You warned the other day that New York City is, quote, reaching a breaking point. It's been 11,000, I believe you said, 11,000 migrants that have come to New York since May. But look at what we just heard from the mayor of El Paso. The other day, they had 2,000 in a single day. How is it that New York City is overwhelmed when it's a fraction of what we're seeing on the border?
Well, what's happening, a playbook that many of the Republican governors, DeSantis and Abbott, are using is now to ship those migrants out to other states, particularly a place like New York. As you saw the mayor of El Paso indicate that when you have sponsors, it's an easier transition. If we would have properly coordinated with the governors in these southern states and stated, let's find where the sponsors are. We have large Venezuelan communities in America. Let's coordinate in that fashion like we've done with other large communities we have in New York City, where we're able to coordinate, get sponsors, work with our non-government organizations. That is what crisis calls for. It calls for coordination. There was no coordination at all with Governor Abbott, and Governor DeSantis just wanted to use this political ploy instead of understanding these are people, these are families, these are human beings.
Have you had any direct contact with either the governor of Florida or the governor of Texas? What's your message to them?
We reached out to Governor Abbott when we first discovered that he was compelling people to get on the bus. He was tagging them. He was sending them on a 45-hour ride without any proper food, water, or medical care. We reached out and stated that let's coordinate and work together so we could deal with this crisis together. They refused to do so. And this is really
wait, let me just get
a cover-up.
Excuse me, are you saying that they wouldn't even take your call?
No, they did just the opposite. They took the call and stated that they would coordinate. I'm talking about Governor Abbott. That they would coordinate, and they did not coordinate at all because I don't think it was politically expedient for them to coordinate. It was more to do this basic political showmanship that you're seeing now.
You pledged during your campaign to...
Wow. So, yeah, you saw Jon Karl there asking Mayor of New York, Eric Adams. So you're saying they didn't take your call? And Eric Adams basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, no, they took the call, and they took the call to say, fuck you, New York. Fuck you. We are not coordinate. We will coordinate, but then when you call to coordinate, we won't coordinate. It's a political stunt. The testimony there from Eric Adams could not be more clear, though, like I said, I am paraphrasing. But anyway, that is the last of my clips I want to show you this week. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put to make this live stream. It's like 8 to 10 hours a week. And thank you, Tom Trask, for the Super Chat contribution. I think this week I might get this live stream monetized. Like the last 2 weeks, YouTube demonetized my live stream, and then when I appealed it, they also said for some reason my live stream was too controversial to be monetized. I don't know why, but anyway, I appreciate the Super Chat contributions. I appreciate the people who support my YouTube channel financially through the links right underneath the video there. You can be a monthly patron on Patreon through a link I put there, or a one-time a one-time PayPal contributor through the PayPal link, or a monthly Patreon patron. Anyway, that is the last of my clips. I will be back every Monday for my Monday media mix-ups, at least through the November midterms, maybe longer. We'll see how it goes. But until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.